So I want to follow up with you today on April 1st, the first day of April, new month, about what's going on with radical Republican Trumpist Congressman Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz recently appeared on the Tucker Carlson show and announced that he is vindicated. And I was thinking, what are you talking about, vindicated? You're under a very serious investigation in which you may be charged. Now, there are some who have already sort of moved on and are assuming that because Matt Gaetz hasn't already been charged, he's not going to be charged. And remember that the possible crimes and charges have a large range up to and including child sex trafficking of a minor across state lines. But needless to say, for some reason, he thinks that he's been vindicated. And here he is talking to Tucker Carlson about it.
A year ago today, 365 days, that the Justice Department leaked a story to the New York Times that it caught our attention immediately. They told the Times they were investigating Congressman Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida, for a very serious crime, underage sex trafficking.
Right.
So Gaetz made an appearance on this show, which turned out to be one of the weirdest interviews we've ever done. He denied it.
True.
He has not been on Fox News since that day. But we did notice, since we've been sort of following it, Matt Gaetz was never charged with anything. So how is that? The Justice Department calls the New York Times and says you're a sex criminal, and then a year later you're not charged with anything? So we thought it'd be worth inviting Congressman Matt Gaetz back on the show to ask for an update. And here he is. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. So to be clear, you were described in the New York Times by the Justice Department as a felony sex criminal. Have you been charged? Do you expect to be charged for felony sex crimes?
No, this was an operation to destroy me, to harm my family, to hinder my ability to serve the district and the movement that I represent in Congress. And we all know there's a pipeline of leaks and lies that flow from the Justice Department to the mainstream media, the New York Times in particular. And that's not even a partisan criticism of the Biden administration. That happened during the Trump administration as well. We saw it during the Russia hoax. But the most important update, the most important thing that's happened since our last on-air discussion, someone has been indicted and has pled guilty to trying to shake down my family based on this pile of lies. And so I'm not going to allow it to hinder me. I'm going to continue the important work that I do here in the Congress for my constituents.
Yeah, so I'm not going to ask any questions about your personal life because it's not my business. It's really simple. If you've committed a crime, let them charge you. And they haven't. And they've smeared your name. Again, your private life is your business. Whether you committed a crime or not is everybody's business, and you haven't. And I just want to ask you one more time, crisply and clearly, do you expect to be charged for the crimes of which they've accused you?
No, that would be a travesty. I'm innocent. I have maintained my innocence. I have been entirely consistent on this fact, and each and every day, the lies about me unravel and are debunked, and the things I've said, and admittedly, it's pretty wild to come on your show and say that my family's being shaken down for $25 million by some fraudsters, some with connections to the intelligence community and the Department of Justice, but in fact, someone has pled guilty to just that. So I feel vindicated each and every day.
So he's vindicated. Now notice a lot of the things that aren't said there. Tucker didn't ask, have you been cleared? Because the answer is he hasn't been cleared. That's number one. It's also important to mention none of the claims reported about Gaetz have been debunked at this point in time. He's just not been charged yet. He may not be charged. I'm completely open to that possibility. But Tucker didn't ask, have you been cleared? Because the answer is no. The thing that he was accused of doing, at one point, he claimed he didn't even know the woman in question. We now have a paper trail where we know that Venmo was actually used to get money through an intermediary to the woman he claimed never to have met. So that has not been debunked. In fact, that's been confirmed. And none of the actual claims to date have actually been shown to be untrue. Also remember, just as like a reminder about the weirdness of this story, in that weird interview a year ago, I remember I was on vacation when this broke and I was on my phone going, what the hell is Matt Gaetz talking about? Matt Gaetz appeared with Tucker in that weirdest interview we've ever done. And he almost like implicated Tucker by saying, you were there with me and had dinner with one of the people I was with. This was one of the strangest moments I've ever seen.
Again, I only know what I've read in the New York Times. I can say that actually you and I went to dinner about 2 years ago. Your wife was there, and I brought a friend of mine. You'll remember her. And she was actually threatened by the FBI, told that if she wouldn't cop to the fact that somehow I was involved in some pay-for-play scheme, that she could face trouble. And so I do believe that there are people at the Department of Justice who are trying to smear me, providing for flights and hotel rooms for people that you're dating who are of legal age is not a crime. And I'm just troubled that the lack of any sort of legitimate investigation into me would then convert into this extortion attempt.
I don't remember the woman you're speaking of or the context at all, honestly, but...
Oh, that if anything could accurately be described as Kafka-esque, I think it would be that. So listen, yes, the truth is Gaetz has not been charged, but he has not been cleared. And the assertions Gaetz has made, many of those have been proven to be false. Like, I don't know this woman. Actually, you do, and you did send her money, supposedly for tuition and books, but you did send her money. And the investigation is ongoing. But what a bizarre situation. Hey, this is really interesting. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones appears not only to have completely turned on Donald Trump at this point, but seems to be lining up behind Ron DeSantis. Now, little bits and pieces of this we've picked up over the last couple of months. There was a story from a couple of months ago where over vaccines, Alex Jones seemed to have turned on Donald Trump. Recently, I believe during an interview with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Alex Jones said something about a DeSantis Green presidential ticket. But now Alex Jones straight up is saying DeSantis is better than Trump. Let's take a listen to this. This was from a recent episode of InfoWars.
I've gone from liking DeSantis to loving DeSantis to my instincts have told me he's good, and now he's got my full backing.
Wow.
He's the real deal. He's better than Trump. I'm not trying to pick favorites here. I want Trump to get jealous and become more like DeSantis. We all need to be more like DeSantis. He's a gentleman. He's smart. He's a family man. He's a patriot. He's a veteran. He is our leader. I mean, if you got to know about who's leading the fight against the New World Order, it's Tucker Carlson and it's DeSantis.
This is a major, for Alex Jones to declare someone else his leader. I know it's very easy to laugh all of this stuff off and go, Alex Jones, who's it is actually, it's horrifying. But it actually there is a movement here. And when they declare a leader, it actually matters.
For classy men that are gentlemen, that really care about everybody, that I would say are the best examples of leadership in America, it's DeSantis and Tucker Carlson. I'm obviously the shock trooper that, is the Kraken you release. And I'm proud to be that. But I can tell you that my job has been to expose this and bring in the men and bring in the women. I use kind of a John the Baptist analogy. God told me that. God's like... Yeah.
Alex Jones is John the Baptist now. Look at how sick this is. But again, if they are getting behind DeSantis, it actually does matter.
You are going to launch the attack. You are going to prepare the ground. Your people are going to prepare the ground. And then you watch the leaders will rise. And we're seeing that. And all of us are rising, ladies and gentlemen. But I just give credit where it's due. It's people like DeSantis... And people like Tucker Carlson. I've almost got Rogan super hardcore. He's almost there. He gets super hardcore.
I don't know if that's true, by the way, that he almost has Rogan. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
And then he kind of goes back a little. But I've just got to spend more time with him. I love Joe. We can hang anytime I want. Anytime I call him, let's go get dinner. Hey, hang out. Sometimes we hang out like twice a week. I just, Joe is really such a sweetheart but he doesn't want to be in the middle of the fight. Not because he's a coward. He's almost embarrassed to be that deep in the fight, and it's just...
Okay, so Alex Jones here making it clear that DeSantis is their leader. Interestingly enough, when you look at the money line, because one of the great things about America, great or terrible, you can bet on anything you want, and people bet on who is the Republican nominee going to be, and it has not shifted significantly. If you go to predictit.org, you can look at the betting markets on a lot of these different questions. And the question, who will win the 2024 Republican nomination, it's pretty steady, but DeSantis is very close to Trump. Trump, about 38 cents of every dollar is being bet on Trump will be the nominee. and 29 cents of every dollar is being bet on Ron DeSantis is going to be the nominee. So this is, let's put it this way. This margin for Trump right now, in terms of who people believe will be the nominee for the Republicans in 2024, this is one scandal away from reversing. If Trump has some major scandal that's really embarrassing among the Republicans, and of course his most devoted followers don't care, but if it's something that people who are still slightly connected to reality are turned off by, that 9 point, that's a 4.5 point swing, right? In the sense that if Trump loses 4.5 and DeSantis gains 4.5, you've got a tie for the Republican nomination. Those are precarious numbers for Donald Trump, given that we are 2.5 roughly years out from the 2024 election. So it's a race to the bottom, believe me, but it's a race to the bottom that we care about because the consequences are unimaginably huge, as I talked about earlier. Republicans winning elections in the next 2 election cycles imperils American democracy. And so that's why we care whether Alex Jones is abandoning Trump or not, and he does indeed seem to be. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts about who you believe will be the Republican nominee. If it's something you're already thinking about, you can find me on Twitter at @dpacman. It is April 1st, and it is great to be here, and we've got a packed program for you coming up today. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpacman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpacman.com. The David Pakman Show is a viewer and listener supported program. You can sign up and get a membership at joinpacman.com. You can also now gift memberships. If you have one, but you want to give one to someone else, you can check the "This is a gift" box in the sign up process. And if you don't have anyone to give a membership to, we have 220 people who have requested free memberships. We will be glad to give them one of the memberships that you gift. You can do it all at joinpacman.com. Let's hear from people in the audience. We do these calls once a week via Discord at davidpakman.com/Discord. And it is a great thing. It's a shame we can't do it more, I would say, much to the chagrin of many in our audience. Let's start today. Oh, I don't know. Let's go to Canada. Let's start with Jason from Toronto.
Hey, Dave. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Thanks for taking my call again. I actually spoke to you recently about Putin and Russia and the impact that would have with Trump in power. So thanks for taking my call again. Just a quick question, not really political or politics related, but more just a personal question. What do you enjoy most about what you do?
Honestly, it's that it's not really a real job in the sense of like, I don't have an annoying boss or have to go anywhere or anything like that. It's just the autonomy, I would say.
Awesome. I know that you've been doing this for a while now. How many years have you had your show?
I think about 80 years now.
That's awesome. Well, anyways, thanks for taking my call. It was just a simple question. Thank
you. Things are good in Canada?
Yeah, things are good. We still have a little bit of snow here in southern Ontario, which is really annoying. But I'll be in the States in a couple of weeks, so I'm kind of excited to go somewhere warmer.
Is Ontario hostile to poutine because it's just too French?
No, it's just less prevalent around here.
Beautiful.
But people embrace the food just as they would in Montreal or across Canada. So
that's good news. I'm pleased by that at least.
For sure.
All right. Thank you for the call. Great to talk to you.
Take care.
All right. There's Jason from Toronto. What a day. Let's go. We're kind of going around the world a little bit today. Let's go to, is it Sagar from Melbourne, Australia?
Hey, David. It's Melbourne, Australia. Yes.
Okay.
And so Sagar.
Sagar. Beautiful. Welcome.
Yeah. So 2 quick questions. Number one, there was a book that came out recently this week. It was called 100% Democracy, The Case for Universal Voting. as well as 2 Washington op-ed pieces. I was just curious because I watched one of your videos from 7 years ago, and you seemed in favor of universal voting, but you weren't really strong in your conviction. I do wonder, 7 years later, and seeing the advent of the Trump administration and voting suppression, have you become stronger in your conviction for the case for universal voting?
Now, just to be clear, do you mean mandatory voting?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, here's the thing. I'm big. I'm big on everybody voting, but I'm not so big on mandatory voting. I respect the idea that opting out of the participating is a valid expression of politics. What I disagree with is people who don't vote because of apathy, people who just don't pay attention, people who don't care. So for me, it's not about force everybody to vote. And in fact, if you do that, that could potentially be a disaster. I'm more about, I want to work towards a system or a framework where everybody wants to vote. I want people to want to vote rather than to force people to vote. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, I completely understand, because I was also of the similar opinion, because I'm originally from Canada and I moved to Australia about 8 years ago. So I was with you on the whole, like, I want to just make it as easy as possible for people to vote. But the thing I've noticed, because Australia does have mandatory voting, and as a citizen, I see that there's a very strong case for it, because first of all, the elections here are held on Saturdays. So it's pretty easy to vote already. And so really the only thing that could come in hand is voter apathy. And in my very strong belief, I believe voter apathy is corrosive to democracy.
Agree.
It is extremely corrosive to democracy. And as well as the election days here are an event. So if you head to a polling booth, you're going to have a sausage, you're going to have drinks. You're going to have time to talk with the representatives from the parties.
Sure.
And it becomes this cherished institution. And I do believe, and also in addition to the whole mandatory thing, it's a $50 fine here. And for the most part, 2/3 of those fines get waived. And so for the most part, there isn't much of a penalty, but it's just this thing that has become ingrained in Australian society, the idea of voting. And it's when you look at the results, it's 96% turnout, 95% turnout, very high turnout. And it's really, and again, in my very strong opinion, if you want to maintain a democracy, voting needs to be a civil duty, similar to how paying your taxes is a civil duty. I believe that voting should be just as strong.
All right. Well, you've made a very strong case for it, and I'm willing to listen to arguments in that direction. Thank you for the phone call.
Thank you so much, David. Have a nice one.
Very powerful call, I must say. Extremely well prepared. That is actually the call everybody should aspire to. Couple minutes long, polite, good audio, right to the topic, prepared. Beautiful, beautifully done. Let's go next to Spencer from California. Spencer, go.
Hey, David. Thanks for taking my call. So I think one thing that we encourage or at least you encourage on your show, is teaching media literacy and viewing it as something that has a positive impact in terms of educating people.
Yes.
I was reading an article which says that part of the way we teach media literacy is telling readers to critically think about how information is constructed, who's paying for it, and what's being left out. Yes. And as a result, this leads to some level of mistrust and maybe even hostility towards news sources, the way that we learn it. And maybe this even drives some radicalization. So what's the right way to develop media literacy skills while trying to prevent this effect of causing people to have this predisposition that media is not to be trusted?
I thought that the caller before you was one of the best calls we've had. This may be in contention for one of the best calls. This is a perfectly constructed question. So your question is a brilliant one, which is, if one has not been exposed to the basic skepticism that we should bring to any messages we receive. And this means a sign on the outside of a building, a TV commercial, a news report. If your first exposure to this type of critical thinking is in media literacy, you might incorrectly develop a hostility towards media because you've never thought about this framework before. And all of a sudden you're being told we've got to apply it specifically to media. You're 100% right. And so what we need to do is that framework of how to think about things, how to know why we believe the things we believe, it has to be introduced earlier before the context is even media literacy. And here's what I mean. If 2 years before media literacy becomes a topic, you are generally instructed on how to evaluate whether something should be believed or not. And it's applied to everything. It's applied to the things your classmates say. It's applied to all sorts of phenomena. Why do you believe? How do you know what your age is? How old are we kids? We're 7. How do you know that? Do you remember each of the 7 years? Well, no, it's because our parents told us. Okay. And how do you right? So if you first develop that as a general framework for evaluating why we believe the things we believe, once it's applied to media, it shouldn't generate that sort of distrust. And you're 100% correct.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then one more question, if possible.
It's going to be, I mean, you may want to go out on top, but let's see this. I don't know if the next question could possibly live up to the first one.
Sure. So maybe on a sort of related issue, how do you respond to friends and people who are simply misinformed, but they're not too far removed from reality in their beliefs? So, for instance, maybe someone who thinks that Biden is largely responsible for gas prices, they might have just heard that somewhere and blindly repeated it without thinking or checking for themselves. But in essence, what I'm asking is, what's the best way to confront these people and tell them that they're wrong without seeming too argumentative or just flat out telling them that they're incorrect?
Oh, I mean, that one's very easy, particularly if it's people you generally get along with. You would say, oh, now that's interesting. Biden's responsible for the high gas prices. Tell me more about that. What did Biden do to raise gas prices? And almost certainly they're already going to go nowhere. And then I would say, oh, well, because, gas prices are up in every country. Does Biden affect gas prices in every country? And if so, how? I would just diffuse that with some very light questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking that was the approach to go also.
All right. Excellent phone call. I congratulate you.
Great. Thanks for taking my call, David.
All right. Very good. Guys, I'm almost scared to take the next call because it's going to be very hard to live up to some of these. Let's go to our old friend Brody from Dallas. Brody, please don't torpedo today's session of calls.
I'm going to do my best, David. How's it going, man?
Going well.
Awesome. Hey, so we're fighting the good fight out here in Texas. We recently had a huge fiasco in the primary elections. We had a huge disparity. We had about 850 Democratic primary voters had their mail-in ballots rejected, and less than 10 Republican primary voters had their ballots rejected. One of the things we've struggled with here is getting help from DC. And I know that there's talk about Joe Manchin possibly carving out some things for different voting rights legislation. What I wanted to know is, what do you see as the most viable path for states like Texas to have protection from DC? Or do you believe that it's just going to have to come from all the state legislatures? And as a follow-up, what would you like to see happen?
So I don't know exactly what you're referring to in Texas. So without knowing the dynamics of it, it's very hard to say specifically what could address that. So just with that as a kind of disclaimer, I would love to see a new Voting Rights Act that restricts the things that states can do and allows for federal oversight. I think many states, a couple years ago, states were sort of released from their requirements to pre-clear changes. I think we need to be adding more requirements in terms of changes that states want to make. That would be the ideal thing. I don't know that that's going to happen. And so, of course, it would be great if states did legislation on voting rights within their own states. But the problem is Republican-controlled states don't really have any interest in doing that. So it's a very tough situation. I don't know what the answer is.
And then as a personal question, would you be willing, like, let's say, would you compromise at all if, let's say, Republicans in the GOP, in the Senate particularly, wanted to enact something? Would you, as a progressive and just you personally, be willing to acquiesce or agree to maybe including voter ID being required as a part of that, so long as it doesn't disenfranchise people? Or do you believe that voting ID is something that should be non-negotiable from the Democrat and the progressive side of things?
So, two-part answer, and these are really, these are big topics, right? So there's a lot of different considerations. I am very skeptical of voter ID because it is a transparently bad faith way for Republicans to disenfranchise people. So that's why I have such a problem with voter ID as proposed and implemented. That being said, if there was a voting rights package that did significant good things and codified them into law, I'd be open to negotiating on voter ID, provided I was satisfied that there really is, it can't cost money to get the documents you need to get the voter ID. It can't require rural poor people to drive to the state capitol in order to get the documents they need to get the voter ID. Like, if I was really satisfied that all of those things were dealt with, I'd be willing to negotiate on voter ID as part of a bigger voting rights package. The problem is, in practice, we know it's just a bad faith way to purge people from voter rolls and prevent people from voting.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I'm glad to have talked with you, and I hope I lived up at least moderately or mildly to the expectations. And it's good to speak to you again. And please encourage all your voters, like you always do, to register and go out and vote.
Everyone must vote. Brody, thank you so much for the call. Let's take a quick break, but we're going right back to the phones in a moment. So if you still want to talk to me after hearing all of these calls, if you still want to talk to me, just hang on. If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind-the-scenes videos, the Daily Bonus Show, the commercial-free Daily Show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and T-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. All right, let's go back to the phones where so many people want to chat. Let's start with Jordan from Minnesota. Jordan, you're on the air. Jordan from Minnesota, you're on the air. Oof, not a great start. Not a great start here. I guess no Jordan from Minnesota. Let's try instead Harry from Columbus, Ohio.
David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you so much for taking my call. Firstly, I wanted to raise a quibble with how you pronounce a certain set of words.
Uh-oh.
Now, whenever you are using the word historic,
Yep.
I notice that you will say a or an historic, which I have no understanding of why you would say an historic. Could you care to explain that?
Yeah, this is a topic of big debate among the grammar Nazis and pronunciation experts. There are certain, typically the rule would be that if the word starts with a vowel, it would be an, and if the word starts with a consonant, it would be a. So a cat versus an apple. The thing about
real quickly, just before we go on, so I know what you're talking about, and if we use the word, let's say hour, like the hour of the day, we would say, oh, it took an hour to get there because we pronounce the word hour with a silent H.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
But the word historic, we do not have a silent H. We have a very hard H.
Well, the thing about that
Harry,
is, and I apologize, in order to fight back against your interruption, I am now going to interrupt.
Please do.
The thing about historic is there are some words where, when pronounced in isolation, they have a very clear consonant sound. Like if I just say historic, but historic has a relatively soft H when in context. And that is why my understanding is that it is acceptable to say an historic, and you're kind of running it together.
If that is how you see it, I can't disagree with it. We'll just have to agree to disagree on that.
That's fair.
Secondly, real quickly, and I wanted to get into this, how do you feel about now that JD Vance has completely, kind of fallen off the wagon a bit, in my opinion?
Yeah.
How do you feel about Josh Mandel Gibbons with the pre-note that Mandel ran against Senator what's his name in 2012? He ran against the current Democratic senator from Ohio, Sherrod Brown.
Sherrod Brown.
lost.
Yeah. Listen,
So-
I think that they're
Go ahead.
all toxic. I think that all of those Republican primary candidates are all completely toxic. Now, you're completely right. Like, listen, a couple years ago, I bought the book Hillbilly Elegy. Everybody said, listen, this book, this is a good story of growing up in the rural, poor, white Midwest and South. You'll understand conservatism. You should really read this book. And I read J.D. Vance's book. And first of all, I mean, his grandma, as he writes in the book, was like a Kennedy Democrat. So it's not even like, it wasn't even that great of an expose about conservatism because his family was actually sort of liberal. But anyway, I was like, okay, this is like a thinking guy. And he has gone completely off the rails, pro-Trump, or at least hesitating to criticize Trump, and just bottom of the barrel, red meat. He's I'm embarrassed that I thought he was mildly reasonable after reading the book.
Yeah, I can see where that perspective came from. And a lot of people still hold that perspective without the knowledge of what he said otherwise. Now, real quickly before I drop, Mandel, I think if Mandel starts the surge, I don't think Trump will throw his hat in the ring. I think he'll see that Mandel lost in 2012. He's a loser, quote unquote.
Yep.
I expect Mike Gibbons to really start to pull ahead if Trump, nominates or,
Endorses.
recommends him. But Trump has been extremely, extremely scared to put his voice into this race.
Yeah, I think he may just be
understand
waiting to see how it shakes out before he does. When's the primary there?
The primary is May 3rd, but as you may or may not have heard, we've had a lot of issues regarding congressional maps, lots of time in the Supreme Court of Ohio. And as of yesterday, Ohio ACLU is suing the GOP map makers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still got a lot of story left to play out here in Ohio. Thanks for taking the call, David.
Hey, real quick, are you talking through a voice modulator or through some kind of metal screen?
I am using a Bluetooth headset. That is probably not the optimal way of talking. I'll try to get on a better microphone next time we speak. Thank you for bringing it up.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate the call.
Of course.
Wow. What a phone call, guys. It is really something else today. Let's go next to Kevin from Virginia. Kevin from Virginia, you're on the air.
Hello, David.
Hello.
I realize this is kind of old news at this point, but I've been trying to call in the last couple of weeks. I want to talk about permanent daylight saving time.
Okay.
Because I am on the side of permanent standard time. And I could go on a diatribe of why I personally think it's better, but I think my best argument on the subject is more of a historical one. So my framing of this issue is, if we are going to go to permanent daylight saving time, what we're really doing is we're changing our time zones by one time zone. And you're kind of saying, if you want to go to permanent daylight saving time, you're saying we got it wrong when we established the time zones in the late 1800s, or you think society has changed fundamentally in that last 150 or so years, that we all benefit from shifting our schedules by 1 hour.
Sure.
And I just don't think that's accurate. I think there was a lot of thought put into the time zones when they were established, and it lined up with solar time that we used for millennia. I don't think we should change that.
So listen, I think that actually society has changed dramatically since the time zones were established by virtue of completely ubiquitous electricity and artificial lighting. I think that it has changed. Now, that's not reason alone to say let's do permanent daylight saving. Now, I lean towards permanent daylight saving. You know why? Because I don't get up early enough to care about it being dark in the morning, and I get a lot of benefit from it being light out an additional hour in winter. In the Northeast, in middle of December, it's ugly. It's depressing what goes on in the Northeast. Now, that being said, I am sensitive to the fact that, if you look at the western edge of certain time zones, like for example, if you look at Columbus, Ohio, is an interesting place. In Columbus, Ohio, they're on the western edge of the Eastern time zone. If we were to do permanent daylight saving time, if I understand correctly, in December, sunrise would be something like 8:20 in Columbus. I looked it up at one point. I don't exactly remember. I agree that that's kind of complicated. That's not so good. So another idea I heard was split the difference, make a 30-minute adjustment and make that permanent. The problem is that then the difference between our time zones and those in other parts of the world are going to be, 6.5 hours, 8.5 hours, which is just very complicated. So I don't know that there's a perfect solution. I hate what we do now, and I lean towards permanent daylight saving time.
I also hate what we do now.
Yeah.
I think we need to be taking a hard look at the schedule of the business day, the schedule of schools. There's been a lot written about school starting too early and the health impacts that has on our children. I feel like going with permanent daylight saving time, we're kind of sidestepping the real issue. But
yeah, there's another issue also, which is there are other countries where it's much more typical that the business and work day starts at either 9:30 or 10 and goes till more like 6 or 7. And then like in a lot of places in Europe, you leave work at 7. And then, you go right to drinks and then a later dinner. Like when I was in Spain, now Spain maintains the siesta for a lot of workers. You open the store at 10 and then you're off from 1 to 3 and then you're open from 3 to 7. And at 7, you go for a drink and at 9:30, you have dinner. And it's just a totally different lifestyle. Now, culturally, I don't know that that'll work in the US, but there's many other configurations of the daily schedule that could work.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you talking to me about this. I'll be curious to see if it does get enacted permanently.
Yeah.
Do you still like it after your first winter going through it? Because right now, we know what standard time is like in the winter, and we have some issues with that. But unless we can remember back to 1974, we don't really know what the mornings are like, winter with DST. And I think people are...
I'll sleep through it, so I just won't know. I mean, I'll be fine.
All right.
All right, Kevin. Thank you. I do care about that topic, actually. I find it pretty interesting. Okay, let's go next to, God, I always struggle with this. Elisa Medua from Dallas. Did I get it right this time, O?
Honestly, I'm giving you an A+ for that because I could tell that you've been putting in the practice, and I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Do most people just call you O?
Yeah, because they have the same issue with butchering my name.
Okay.
So it's because my parents are from Nigeria, but I was born here, so you'd have to blame my mom for that.
Fair. Well, we'll do that on a different episode.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much for taking my call. Today, I wanted to talk about something different, and it's in regards to food. And I know it's not a very attractive topic to be talking about, given how we're talking about Ukraine, Trump, and Biden. But I feel like food is a big issue, or not a big issue, but obesity in general in the United States is obviously a very concerning issue that not enough people are talking about. And I feel like, most of it stems from, our poor, guidance and education on food in general. A good example of this is the first food pyramid that came out in I think the 80s for the United States, where, the very bottom of the food pyramid said that we should have 6 to 11 servings of bread, pasta,
right,
but less servings of, vegetables and fruit.
Yep.
I have no idea how that makes sense whatsoever, but I also know that, unfortunately, Big Food, AKA the food lobby, they were, pressuring, the USDA, a lot in terms of, making sure that they would be able to push their products. So I know I kind of went all over the place with this, but I guess my question is, what do you think that we could do to, combat this issue with, obesity and I guess, what do you think that we could do?
It's such a big topic. there's so many issues here. And, oh man, and it also gets very touchy politically to talk about obesity. There's a bunch of different things here. First of all, of course, there's an educational aspect to it where a lot of people have been given bad information or no information about, what it actually means to eat like a healthy, balanced diet. Number two, you look at marketing and the way that marketing for food products, not for ingredients, for food products, because that's what they are, steers people towards unhealthy food. I mean, most of the food that's marketed is not healthy because just basic ingredients don't really need marketing. I mean, okay, like you'll see like avocados in general advertised, or sometimes like milk generally. But for the most part, the advertising is for finished food products. You then see the financial incentive where, just growing corn, it's like, okay, it's just corn and that's what it is. But if you can separate corn into 10 different products and then use them as additives and you can generate more profit, but you're also giving people extremely processed items. Habits that are set by parents for young kids and the age at which, kids start having juice and soda and candy and this type of thing. There's so many different things here that it is just a massive problem to get our head around. And there's no easy solution at this point.
Yeah, I totally understand. And one book that I've been looking into reading, it's called Food Politics. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book, but no. I'm probably going to pick up the book sometime soon to get a better understanding of that. Mm-hmm. But thank you so much for taking my call. And really quick, special shout out to David Pepper. Really good interview that you did with him. I actually know him, not like super personally, but I've met him on campus at the University of Cincinnati. So I was like really shocked to see you, like David and David, interviewing each other. So again, thank you so much for everything that you do. And again, good interview. And I hope to talk to you soon, man.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks for the call. Always great to hear from O. Let's talk to Brian from Eastern Shore, Maryland. Not a place I've heard of before, Brian. Brian, you're on the air. You've got to unmute in order to talk to me, though. Oh, boy. That's too bad. Things were going so well. They really were. I guess no Brian there. Let's go to South Cat from Virginia. South Cat, you're on the air.
Hello, David. Thanks for taking my call. I actually popped on to listen, but I will ask you. I'll bring something up that's been on my mind.
Sure. And by the way, are you originally from Virginia?
No, I'm actually from Australia.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's okay. So, something came up in my mind recently was how much it actually costs to have a child in the US. Mm-hmm. Whether you're insured or not insured or anything like that. And if you're not insured, and this is a basic right to have a child, and I think there's very few opportunities to have a child for free. This is reproduction. Right. I'm not sure if you know anything more about that, but then you've also got the issue of the abortion issue that's going on. And I've just really found it quite shocking that it can cost it. I mean, if you've got a private room, you've got the money, so it all comes down to money. Is that anything you've thought about?
Yeah, I mean, it's this way with a lot of different things, and depending on what you consider a right, you would focus in on different aspects. When I had my random appendectomy, I believe the sticker price was $40,000. I was at the hospital in total, I think about 8 hours, I think, and it was about 40 grand. From what I've read, the sticker price on most deliveries can approach $100,000, and if there's complications, you could be talking about $500,000 every day in the NICU is just outrageous. Yeah, I mean, this is a bigger problem. It's a systemic problem that relates to the healthcare system, but you're 100% correct.
Yeah, I just think, I mean, I understand that there's huge problems with the healthcare system, but having a baby, it's just struck me as crazy.
Yeah.
That it costs. I mean, at least maybe they could.
I mean, listen,
back.
it's crazy, but there's a lot of other equally crazy things in the United States. So I don't disagree with you. It's just, I'm sort of used to it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for taking my call.
All right. South Cat from Virginia, originally from Australia. Folks, I think we did it despite the 2 dropped calls. One of the best series of calls ever on the show. We will take a break and be back with much, much more after this. Follow us on social media. Interact with the David Pakman Show community. See exclusive content. See when we're taking calls live. And stay up to date on other big show announcements. We post daily. Find us on Reddit, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, and TikTok. Let's get right into this week's world famous mailbag. If you have a message for me, hopefully substantive, hopefully not containing slurs, you can email info@davidpakman.com, and many of you do. And we review a handful or so of a couple handfuls, I guess depends on the size of your hand, a handful of those emails every single week, starting sometimes with people who don't like me. Dakota wrote in with the subject, "You're a village idiot." Now, almost a requirement is that you use the wrong form of "your" versus "you are." And indeed, that's what Dakota does. You're a village idiot. A village idiot. Okay. You spit on all the graves of all the fine people who have fought for this country and die for your lazy ass. Anybody know what they're talking about? You piss on the graves of all the fine people who have gave their lives for you can say the S and lies you spume. You S on the lives of the family members who have given their sons and daughters so you slime ball can lie like you do. You are garbage and an effing waste of sperm. Please go back to school and get an education, and maybe you can get a job on CNN. You're a loser. That's YOUR. I think this is sort of like a presented without comment type of scenario. Let's move on. This one almost just as bad. Jeremy wrote in with the subject, "Commie idiot." This email, you have to describe them, in case people are listening, written in all capital letters. Jeremy writing, "Hey, commie genius, if there's global warming, why is it so cold here in Texas, more like global cooling? We're sick of fake news media, and you're dumb. The only media we trust now is OAN and Newsmax. I hope you freeze to death," spelled like the great drummer Josh Freese, not freeze. "I hope you freeze to death with your global warming and COVID hoax. P.S. You're gay. YOUR. You're gay. P.P.S. Trump won by a landslide. He's still my president and yours to commie. Just wait till March 4. You and the other commies will be arrested. The military is taking control and Trump is in charge. Education, critical thinking, mental health treatment, media literacy, many deficits in this country exposed by the mailbag. All right, let's get into more substantive stuff. Felix wrote in saying, "Trump guilty of numerous felonies. Why not prosecuted?" It's a fair question. "Dear David, sir, I genuinely don't understand it. Trump seems to be guilty of numerous felonies. Why isn't he prosecuted? Why not convicted? Why is there obviously no interest in doing so? Are there serious consequences for the person who would have the power to do it? This person could go down in the history books. Wouldn't it also be something the Democrats could use well in the election campaign? I genuinely don't get it." These are all fair questions. And what we learned last week is that the prosecutors investigating Trump in Manhattan believed he had indeed committed multiple provable felonies and resigned. So did Mark Pomerantz, the prosecutor, resigned because he thought it clear that there was no actual plan to prosecute Trump. He said, we've done the investigation. We have the evidence. The evidence is solid enough we could prove this stuff in court, but there's no interest in prosecuting. And as I've said before, there's big hesitation to be the first to prosecute. I believe if you saw one prosecution of Trump, that you would see many. And what they're afraid of, I don't know at the end of the day. As many of you know, we did start publishing the David Pakman Show clips to the right-wing platform Rumble. Langdon wrote in about Rumble and saying, it's not so much free speech. Hey, David, when I saw you joined Rumble, I figured I would join as well and test their claims of being immune to cancel culture and 100% free speech. As you probably know, videos and comments are rated by the number of rumbles received. You can rate a video or comment with a positive or a negative rumble. So for example, if a comment gets 4 positives and 6 negatives, your net rumble is -2. When you get into the negative, your comment is automatically hidden and you are not allowed to reply to any replies to your original comment. This is not a shock. This is not a shock. And there is no, listen, we all know that we're a free, if a platform markets itself as being a free speech platform, it's already kind of weird. When I think of platforms, I think about their functionality and utility. YouTube, the biggest video sharing site in the world. Oh, it's about sharing videos. That's what it's about. TikTok. It is a rapidly growing vertical format, short form video content. Oh, okay. That's what it's about. When someone says this is a free speech platform, it's almost not even really a meaningful mission or description. And you should, anytime you hear that, you should at least be wondering, what the hell are they talking about? Let's see. Mike wrote in about my appearance on the right-wing Michael Knowles show, saying, Dear David Pakman, coming from a conservative perspective, I heard you on the Michael Knowles show this morning and wanted to thank you for coming across the aisle to have such a civil conversation about such polarizing issues. I was extremely impressed in the way you engaged him. I meandered over to your site and again was quite impressed. I'm looking forward to exploring more of your content. I hope other Daily Wire followers are as appreciative of your willingness to debate these topics, something I find less and less of these days. Best of luck. Yeah, I actually did get 3 very nice emails from people who caught my Daily Wire appearance. Here's another one. Kyle, hey, really enjoyed your perspective while you were on the Michael Knowles show. I don't agree with everything he said. I don't agree with everything he says, but finding different opinions where crap is not shoved down our neck without a moment to hear a counter opinion is not always easy to find. I appreciate you having the conversation with him and keeping him honest. I appreciated your insistence be heard so I could understand your perspective better, even if it challenged my own views. This is great. This is great to see. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the messages I got were horribly anti-Semitic and just slurs and attacks. But I did get 3 nice messages from that appearance. Carrie wrote in. Carrie says, hey, David, love your show. My whole family watches together every night. Miss you on weekends. Not sure if you've covered this, but it would be interesting to delve into the psychology behind why some people believe in conspiracy theories. There must be a certain personality type that has the tendency to be drawn into conspiracy over truth and facts. Have a great day. It is an interesting topic. We've studied it extensively, and I've done a number of interviews. And at the end of the day, in talking with a person, you'll sometimes learn that they don't like uncertainty. And not liking uncertainty often goes hand in hand with being susceptible to conspiratorial thinking. And the underlying kind of idea is when terrible things happen, seemingly that are random, that can be really tough for people who want to believe everything is certain, everything is planned, everything is predictable and happens for a reason. And so it starts to become preferable to them to believe instead of, wow, that was a random bombing. I could have been there, or my loved ones could have been, anybody could have been there. That's crazy, completely unpredictable. Instead, it's more comforting in a way to know there's not random bad stuff. That was a planned event. It was a false flag. It was whatever. That idea or that feeling is common to a lot of conspiratorial thinking. Not all, and there's much more to it, but that is something we've explored and very much worthwhile. Last one today is from it's from Joseph, and it's about the Ketanji Brown Jackson hearings, and it makes no sense. The subject line is Judy demeaning yourself. I don't know what that means. Anyway, it says, David, when you just lie and act like Justices Barrett and Kavanaugh were not qualified for the Supreme Court based on their resume, you just demean yourself. Both were highly qualified, just as Ketanji Brown Jackson is. When you feel the need to lie and ignore reality, you undermine everything you say. I never said Barrett and Kavanaugh were unqualified. What I said were two things, and this is where please react to the things I say, not the things you heard or want me to have said. What I pointed out was, if you look at her experience across 8 different areas of law and judging, Judge Jackson is more qualified than all 9 currently on the court. That's one thing I said, and I believe that that's true. If you look at her experience, not only as a federal judge, but on a sentencing commission, and you look at all those things, she has more types of experience than any of the 9 currently on the court do. In addition, I said, the idea that Kavanaugh and Barrett could be qualified and Jackson isn't is laughable. So I never said Kavanaugh wasn't qualified. I never said Barrett wasn't qualified. What I said is it's cartoony to suggest Kavanaugh and Barrett might be qualified, but Jackson is not. That doesn't make any sense. So Joseph, critical listening. Critical listening, very, very important skill to learn. So we used to call it active listening in school. Let's learn it. We have a great bonus show for you today. Sign up at joinpacman.com to get access. We will be a little bit of a different schedule going on next week, but I will tell you about it soon. But don't miss today's bonus show.